Thank you, Kevin, for that very inspirational presentation and evocation of how it is we can begin to affect this thing. We've got some time for questions now, so I'd like to encourage those of you who want to explore this in further detail, raise your hands. Do we have a microphone that we can walk out to the audience to catch this? Who's got the mic? Over here, please. Say your name and organization if you like and ask your question.
Laura Ayres with Transition Sonoma Valley and the Grange. I don't think very many people know, and we need for people to know, that if the wealth of this nation was $100, the top fifth of the population would own $84. The second one down would be 11. Then you have $4.85. Then it's a dime, and then it's the bottom poorest poor is a nickel. That seems to me, and this came from some academics, and they had asked people what did they think was the way it was divided up. What they had thought it was like Sweden, something like 38, 28, 24, 5, and or 11, and anyway, it was a lot different. And I think that would be a really simple way to help people to realize just how bad things are.
Anyone want to comment on that? Absolutely. There's a huge gulf between reality and perception on that issue. It comes up over and over again. Go ahead.
This is something I've said a lot when I've talked about the Mondragon cooperatives and about and about our book that just came out, because there's a chapter in it about the myths that are prevalent in American society, the stories that we tell ourselves about what our country is founded on and what it believes. And one of the polls that was done around the 2000 election asked people if they thought they were part of the 1%. That was one of the questions. Are you part of the 1%? Well, 19% of the respondents said they were. But that's not even the best part. Another 20% of the people who answered these questions said they thought they would become part of the 1%. So now you've got 39% of representing the American population who believe so much in this kind of dream nightmare that we've been sold that they really think they're positioned to be part of that 1%. It's buying that story and I think what you just mentioned, Lauren, is a way of seeing through that story, because people have to wake up to that myth. And when 39% of the population is buying it, we've got some educating to do.
Okay, let's see. There was a question here, I believe. Yes. Wait for the microphone, please. We're trying to capture this audio.
Are there any litigation issues pending on the TPP? Yeah, is any litigation? It seems so unconstitutional.
There's nothing pending on the TPP yet. I mean, there's lots of litigation on other trade agreements through these tribunals that Arthur mentioned. What's that? But there's nothing being done at this point to sue to stop it. In fact, I think it'd be pretty hard to find standing to sue in this country. Standing is very limited. We've reduced it, so citizens have less right to go to the third branch of government to redress grievances, whether it's corporate or government. And so it's much harder to sue than it used to be.
Okay, here in the middle.
What entity authorized the fast track policy?
It's Congress. So as was mentioned earlier, the Constitution grants Congress authority over setting the terms of trade policy, and there's a historical reason for that. The colonists were very unhappy with the British monarchies, unilaterally setting trade policy and tariff levels for the colonies, and you saw this exhibited in the Boston Tea Party, the Declaration of Independence, other parts of the American Revolution. And so when the founders created the Constitution, they gave that branch closest to the people, i.e. the Congress, the authority to set our trade policy. They let the executive negotiate with foreign governments, but the Congress set the terms of our trade. And that's one of the classic checks and balances of the Constitution. And for almost 200 years, that's how trade policy was set. Congress exerted very tight control over that constitutional authority. Starting with the Nixon administration, as was mentioned, things changed. And Nixon actually had proposed that he be allowed to unilaterally declare changes to U.S. law when negotiating a trade agreement. Congress didn't like that, but they did allow, fast track as the alternative. Literally hundreds of trade policies have passed in recent decades in those periods between the fast track delegations that were mentioned. So it's not like you need fast track to have trade or to have trade policy. What you need fast track to do is to ram through these corporate power grabs disguised as trade agreements. And it's Congress who grants the executive that part of their constitutional authority. And so, as was mentioned, fast track expired in 2007. It would need to be passed in both chambers of Congress to apply to the TPP. And frankly, I think the House is where we have the most potential to stop fast track. And that's what we're urging folks to do, to call their U.S. representatives in Congress and do a lot of other action to stop fast track for the TPP.
I'll just say on
Trade Promotion.
Trade Promotion Authority. I'll just add one point. On our flushthetpp.org website, we have a link to a book that Lori Wallach, who's in the New York Times today, co-authored on the history of fast track, and an article she wrote. So if you want to learn more about fast track and its history, there's a lot of details that's available for free on the internet.
Great. There's a question over here.
Yeah, it's, my name is Brian Scholl. I'm an independent landscape architect, and it's less of a question, more of just a thought, but I had to share it with the audience, and it rounds out where we were talking about. One person was talking about Germany today. Back in, what was it, 04, 03, I was protesting was involved with the peace movement, protesting the march to war. And over food with my girlfriend's German parents mentioned my efforts and was lectured, schooled in the fact that to get the wall broken down, he said that everyone was in the street. And I don't know whether that translates to 50% of the actual people in Berlin or what, but I guess just whatever thought that stirs up.
Well, the thought it stirs up for me is the unpredictability of what's going to happen next. Chris Hedges, again, was covering the downfall of the Soviet Union and lots of the revolutions that were occurring in 1989, and he was in East Germany meeting with activists who were trying to tear down the wall, or at least to open up the passage between East and West. And they've said that they hope that maybe within a year they could have people crossing the border. The next day, the wall was coming down. And we can see that again, just recently in Turkey. Turkey had been an economy growing at about 5% a year compared to Cyprus and Greece, its neighbors, doing much better. They announced the plan to, remake a park into a shopping area, and there's a massive revolt. There is a lot of discontent in the United States. You can see it in how people think about Congress, how they think of the media, how they think of even the courts now. And you can see them on issue after issue, how they want to go one direction and the government's going the other direction. And so popular resistance can bubble up very quickly. We don't know what the instigator will be, but what we want to try to do is create a framework so when people do get angry and start to take action, there's a strategy. There's a goal, there are tactics, and people can work within a framework and work together. So our goal really is to create a situation so that no matter what opportunity presents itself, people are better prepared to handle it and take it to the next level as best they can.
Thank you. Other questions?
The person in the yellow shirt over there had his hand up first.
Yellow shirt?
Yellow shirt.
Right, yeah.
There he is.
Thank you. Tell us your name and organization.
Come get the microphone.
Dave Ransom, People's Tribune, and the occupied press of the North Bay. What is the Green Shadow Cabinet? What does it do? And how many people here are in the cabinet?
Great question.
Go ahead.
if there's anybody else that's in the cabinet, I know a number of the speakers were, yeah.
Oh, we got Mark.
That's right, Mark is in the cabinet, Ellen is in the cabinet, Gar Alperovitz, who is here. The Green Shadow Cabinet is a project that came out of the Jill Stein and Sherry Hunkela campaign because, you know, as we've been talking about so much in this conference, we really have one political party here with a Democratic and a Republican wing, right? But a lot of people are kind of stuck in that because they don't see a real alternative. You know, there's such disadvantages to third parties in this country, but there's a need for a voice, for an alternative voice out there that's different from what we're hearing from these two corporate parties. And so the Green Shadow Cabinet was brought together from the Jill Stein campaign. It's somewhat affiliated with the Green Party, but not an exclusively Green Party entity. And it was bringing together people to take on cabinet positions and then give this alternative viewpoint so that this voice would still be out there and that people could see in this country that there are people who really could step up and take on these roles. Not that we have no political ambition. We just really want to get this alternative view out there and show you that these solutions are real, that there are real people in this country that have this wisdom, and then we hope that it will actually evolve, ideally, if we could transform the political system in this country, if people in their communities would also form shadow governments, form a shadow city council, form a shadow county council. If you're not making headway, and even if you are, because it doesn't run counter to electoral politics. If you want to pursue electoral politics, go for it. But form shadow governments in your own community and decide what you need. And then scare your county council into giving it to you. You probably want to comment on that. But we're hoping it's the beginning of people seeing that we could do things differently. We have it in not just cabinet positions, but we created councils. So on my health council, I have people from all around the country with expertise in various areas that we consult together on what's going on and what solutions we would like to put forth as alternatives, because there's much more wisdom when we act collectively. So that's another piece of it as well.
I'll just add one quick point to that. When we started talking about this with Jill Stein and Sherry Honkela and Van Mansky, our campaign manager, and a few others, there was about a half dozen of us. The initial idea was a small cabinet of six or eight people. It's now about 100. And as Margaret said, we have councils. I have a justice council with some really great lawyers on it. Michael Ratner from the Center for Constitutional Rights, Jesslyn Raddick from Government Accountability Project, Shahid Buttar from the Bill of Rights Foundation. I mean, so we have a lot of really good people, and that's how it is throughout the cabinet. There really are a lot of people in this country who are involved and active and concerned and don't see either party working. One thing that we insist on, by the way, when we talk about strategy, and this is separate from the Green Shadow Cabinet, is we believe in independence from the two parties. We need to make sure, that doesn't mean you can't be supportive of an individual in one of the parties, but we are not going to let our goals be limited by their partisan needs. We are going to set the goals that we want and work toward them. And just like Martin Luther King, he's our leader on this. When Dr. King was one of the leaders of the civil rights movement, he never endorsed a candidate. He never supported a particular party. He saw both parties as part of the problem. They were both segregationist, Jim Crow-dominated parties. They were both opposed to equality. And so he felt he had to be the conscience of both, the critic of both, and not the servant of either. And he never joined a political party, and we take that same approach. Independence from the two parties is a critical step. Whether you leave the party or not individually, the movement itself should not set its goals based on what the party finds, either party finds acceptable. We should set our goals, what the people and the planet need, and work from that point on.
Mike, over here, please. And then we'll come back to you.
My name is Duane. The Constitution does not contain the word agreement. There's no provision for passing agreements. The Constitution assigns that duty to the Senate to pass treaties. NAFTA failed to get the two-thirds requirement to pass as a treaty. The WTO assigns the duties of our courts to a group of unnamed attorneys Both of those things are totally unconstitutional. We would need a constitutional amendment for the WTO to be constitutional. The whole project is unconstitutional and should be called out for what it is. It is treason. Thank you.
Well said.
I know that in Latin America, because of the integration of the various countries that's happening now, where they're really strongly looking to each other, it's like a solidarity of countries, and not looking to North America, that both President Bush and President Obama went down at separate times for a free trade agreement of the Americas and came back empty-handed. And so I'm wondering if there are some movements of some kind in some of the other TPP countries where we can have a solidarity of countries as well.
Yeah, there's opposition to the TPP in each of the countries involved. You know, some countries opposing and resisting your government is a lot more dangerous. So our allies in Malaysia will pack people into cars. They'll drive up to a street corner, they'll jump out, they'll hold their signs, they'll chant for a minute or two, they'll hop in and they'll drive to the next intersection because they don't want to go to prison for protesting, but they're doing that against the TPP. Our allies in Japan, about 12 million Japanese people had signed a petition opposing the TPP before Japan even got in. So there's a lot of opposition around the world. It's not just on our shoulders. And, you know, again, to put the TPP in context, in the 90s it was the World Trade Organization. And because of that unique period of time in the 90s, the end of history, U.S. is the sole superpower, it did get into power. But ever since the Battle in Seattle in '99, the movement of movements across borders has stopped the expansion of the WTO. Then they went to the Free Trade Area of the Americas, tried to expand NAFTA to the Western Hemisphere. That was defeated. Then they went to a bunch of regional and you know, bilateral free trade agreements, some of which passed, CAFTA by 2 votes, others which we've defeated. And now they're trying again. They're getting, you know, they're thinking people are asleep. Let's go for another big one, the TPP. And I believe we're going to defeat them.
I would just add to that, yeah, definitely. You know, I started my talk saying this is the people of the world against transnational corporate power, because the people of the world are opposed to this. There's opposition all over the world. I'd say the United States is more muted because I think we have much more effective propaganda-controlled media control here, so people know less about it. But that's changing. And as Kirk said, as people know about it, it's going to be defeated. So I think the people of the world are waking up, the people of the United States are waking up, and I do think this is something that can be defeated. In Japan, the current president, Abe, ran on a platform opposing getting into the TPP. Now he's joining it. So he's going against even his own, you know, what his own polling showed him would get him elected. So he knows he's going against the tide in Japan. I just can't see China actually joining this because it would just be neoliberalism forced onto a Chinese economy that's not a neoliberal economy. So I don't know how that's going to happen. So we'll have if it goes forward, it'll probably be an agreement without, you know, one of the biggest economy in the region, which will be rather strange. So I really do think that we have an incredible opportunity to defeat transnational corporate power here. But it's going to take us working together. We've got to recognize this for the danger it is. We've got to recognize that just as we look back at corporate personhood now from the 1880s, that's when that began, 1880s, 1890s. We're going to look back, if we fail on this, at the corporate global coup, the trade tribunals, the whole new legal system created in favor of corporations as much more dangerous than what the corporate personhood was. So this is a very important battle, folks. I hope that you are engaging that and are ready to engage in this effort to stop transnational corporate power.
I'm going to take the privilege of holding the mic. Arthur just came from an amazing 2-day conference called Moana Nui. And I'm thinking that in the last 2 days we haven't really talked about the military that much, and that the resistance and the resistance to our militarization of the Pacific was the topic of that. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Moana Nui conference, this was the second one held. It was in Berkeley this weekend, organized by the International Forum on Globalization and others, brought together Pacific Islanders, you know, indigenous peoples from throughout the Pacific Rim to talk about primarily what U.S. Trade and military policies have been doing to people throughout that region. Very, very moving conference and gathering of people sharing, stories of resistance that, with family members being killed, people going to prison as political prisoners, resistance that just, to me, makes me feel so much more responsible, and how we need to step up as Americans and really take accountability for what our government is doing, not only to us and our neighbors, but to people throughout the world, and just really reminded me of the privilege that we have and the freedoms that we have in this country, and just strengthened my resolve to fight the TPP, to fight militarization in all its forms, because it's true, it is a two-sided coin of the trade policies, the economic policy on the one hand, and the fist, the threat on the other hand. But when we as people come together and tell our government no, that opens up the possibility for the other world for our neighbors around the world.
I wanted to just mention quickly, there's an excellent article in The Nation about what the Colombia Free Trade Agreement has done down there and the horrors that it has unleashed in that country with displacing people from their homes, the increase again in the killing of people that are resisting as they stand up for their rights, and also with the Asia pivot, and you have to wonder if this Trans-Pacific Partnership isn't part of our Asia pivot if you're not aware that Obama is shifting 60% of our Navy over towards Asia. There's a strong group of people in the Korean island of Jeju Island. And so if you don't know about Jeju Island, I would recommend that you go to Save Jeju. Is it savejeju.org, I think? We have an article that we wrote about Korea that we were really surprised to learn the U.S. history of aggression in Korea, and you may be surprised at what we learned as well. So I recommend that you read that if you need more fuel to fire your resistance.
That's on our website, Clearing the Fog. FOG is our radio show. FOG stands for Forces of Greed. Clearing the Fog Radio, we have an article about the Korean history, and you'll be amazed by it. It'll change your whole perspective about North Korea being insane. And I think you'll really see why they're taking the actions they're taking when it's put into historical and current context.
I wanted to mention about, when you mentioned, Margaret, about patents and copyrights, because what I saw happen in NAFTA, I also was a musician before I did what I'm doing now, and I get ASCAP royalties, and I was getting propaganda from ASCAP, which I'm sure many people, other artists, writers were getting, to support NAFTA, because it was saying this is going to make sure that we get our royalties, and so it was really trying to gather support from the artistic community. And I'm sure the same thing would be happening with this Trans-Pacific Partnership. So I'm already seeing how they will be selling it to Hollywood and to artists and to writers. And it's something to be aware of, that they're going to be propagandized and how we can be ahead of that curve.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, let's go out to the audience for some more questions. Here, and then we'll go there, and then we'll come down here, okay? And please tell us your name and organization.
Maureen Shimo, no organization. Kevin, could you talk a little bit about the Democracy Convention in August and the potential for growing the movement?
I had that on my list of things to say. I just forgot, I'm sorry. Democracy Convention, I think so much of what we're talking about really is about the lack of democracy in the United States, in both our economy, in our government, and many institutions. And we're having a Democracy Convention in Madison, Wisconsin from August 7th to 11th. Margaret and I are organizing the economic democracy track, but there'll be tracks on military, education, on elections, on about 10 different areas where democracy needs to reign. And we live in kind of a mirage democracy. The term of art that's used these days is managed democracy, which means that we get to vote, but we're managed in who we get to pick from. And we get to pick from two Wall Street candidates that would make, either one will make Wall Street happy. and either way we're going to lose and not get what we want in our elections. So this democracy convention, last time it was held 2 years ago, more than 1,000 people attended. We don't know what to expect this time, but expect it'll be even bigger this time. I think democracy really underlies so much of what we're doing. We see the popular resistance really as a democracy movement. And by the way, you can get these cards outside on the left-hand side in the hallway out there if you want to get information about popular resistance. Sign up for our weekly newsletter, get involved. We'll be announcing more steps in the TPP campaign through that website.
All right, thanks. We had a question here, the woman in the brown. Hold on, please wait for the microphone.
Hello, my name is Catherine Gunderson, and I'm from Santa Cruz, and I think I said pedestrian as far as my group when I registered, but I'm with Transition Santa Cruz and various other groups. But I am so full of hope about not only this public banking and what we're all doing here, and it's so great, but I also have one other thing that I really want to see get out to people that they don't know about. It's going back to what you were talking about with a few minutes ago about, oh God, now I can't remember, sorry. Anyway, it'll come back to me, but IRV, instant runoff voting, ranked voting. Nobody I know that I talk to knows about it. And I just feel like, for somebody in the Green Party or another party who should be part of the conversation, should be part of these so-called debates and open it up politically so it's not just the one party. It would be so great if we could get that out there, and I just wondered what your take was on that and all that.
Part of managed democracy is limiting who gets on the ballot and making it very hard for getting on the ballot and having rules that make it hard for a third alternative to compete with the two corporate parties. Instant runoff voting, for those who don't know, is ranking your voters, your choices of candidates. So if it was the Bush, Gore, Nader, Buchanan race, you could write Bush, Buchanan as your top two choices. Or Nader, Gore, or whatever your preferences are. And the way it works is until somebody gets 50%, they take off the bottom person and their votes get divided, and then you get a 50, your vote counts. And that's a very strong way to improve the chances of a third-party candidate actually winning and being competitive. And it changes the whole way that the election runs, because you want to get the vote of your opponent, from voters. And so you're not going to start calling your voter names and, being rude and crude. You're going to, in fact, be nice. Oh, I agree with you on that point. So that the voters, oh, that's my second choice. He agrees with me on that point. And so it changes the whole tenor of a campaign. The downside, I say, of IRV is that our strength historically in third-party campaigns has been getting enough of a percentage of a vote to affect the outcome. The abolitionists, for example, never won a campaign, but they gradually weakened the Whig Party and the Democratic Party so that a kind of modest abolition party, not really an abolition party, but a don't spread the slavery party. The Republicans were formed, and Lincoln became the most successful third-party president in history. But most of the time, it hasn't worked out that way. It's been the populists, the socialists, the progressive party, the Bull Moose Party, all getting a small percentage of the vote, but enough of the percentage to show that they were significant and that they could affect the outcome of the election. And that would force one of the two parties to accept part of their platform. And so I'm not sure which is better or worse for us. In some ways, if we are not afraid of embracing spoiling an already spoiled electoral system, by embracing the idea of affecting the outcome of the election, then I think IRV actually hurts us, because with IRV, the 6% becomes meaningless. It just gets absorbed by whoever ends up, getting those votes. But in a non-IRV situation, the 6% can affect the outcome. And if we say when we get 6% to the Democrats, let's say, you keep putting up millionaire Kerrys and anti-environment, pro-war Gores, as what he was when he was a candidate, by the way. He was not a great environmental vice president. You keep putting up, Hillary Clinton, who signed a memo ordering UN diplomats to be spied on by U.S. diplomats against the law. You put people like that up, we're going to keep spoiling the election. You wake up and stop doing this corporate crap and representing the people, then you might win an election again. We have to have the courage to take that power. And I think that was the big mistake, by the way, of 2000. We should have embraced Nader and said, yeah, you were right. Gore was a corporatist. He's a militarist. He's not someone that would have been a great president. He gave a speech before the invasion of Iraq, before the Council on Foreign Relations, that urged the invasion of Iraq, that supported attacking Korea, the whole axis of evil, the war on terror. In fact, he was urging attacking Iran. Just Google Gore, Council on Relations 2003, and you'll see this speech. He would not have been much better than Bush, as much as we want to think he would have been. He would not have been much better. We should have embraced Nader and said, you were right, we're standing with you in 2004, and they put up the richest guy in the Senate, Kerry, who's become a warmonger, a corporatist. We should have said, no, we're not going to support anyone but Bush. You got to do better than that. We're supporting Nader again. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and I think that was a big mistake of our movement not to embrace that political power that we gained in 2000, showing we could affect the outcome of our election.
Okay. We're going to take one more question here, and then I'm going to wrap it up. And I'm sure that the panelists can stay around for time for one-on-one conversation. So let's come down here.
Earl Stalin from Denver. A question about the media, which of course doesn't cover a lot of things, and there's the Project Censored, which has shown a number of topics that aren't covered, and even the so-called alternative media have refused to cover things, and I wonder how you see us overcoming that problem. It's great to see Larry O'Donnell speaking out on the TPP in the New York Times article, but obviously you've thought about this.
We have thought about it. I mean, I think we're really, like so many issues, we're at a critical point of a transition where we have seen the independent media and the citizens media grow, multiply quickly, while at the same time we're seeing the corporate media weakening. We're seeing the peak level of newspaper readership was 1984. 1984. It's been going down ever since. And there's good and bad in that. I'm not saying that's all good news, but there's good and bad in that. Profits for the corporate media are shrinking. The biggest, most of these cable news shows have a few 100,000 viewers. They're not that gigantic. And so I think there's a point in time, and I think it's coming pretty soon, where the independent and citizens media can actually become the more powerful source of news. But it takes us realizing our power again. So much of this is about us not buying the idea we're powerless. You look what, as I said, look what 0.1% did during the Occupy. We are not powerless. And I think the same is true within the media. And I think one reason why you're seeing Julian Assange in the New York Times yesterday, and you're seeing the TPP in the New York Times today, is because the corporate media knows it's losing its audience. It's losing its credibility. When we organized the Occupy at Freedom Plaza, we decided on a course that ignored the corporate media. We knew the corporate media would either ignore us or do their best to denigrate and divide us and destroy us. They were not going to be our allies. They're not going to report fairly. So instead what we did was we reached out to all the independent media. We listed on our website about 75 different independent media outlets who promised to cover us. And we also put on our media page information for citizens on how to turn their telephone into a TV station, on their rights to film cops, on their ability to use social media to get out information about their blogging power. Because we wanted the corporate media, when they came to our website, to know that if they lied about us or they didn't cover us, their credibility was going to go down. And I think that's critical. And so just this, I was so happy, I was involved at Bradley Manning, as was mentioned in the introduction, and I was out at the Fort Meade this Sunday. Was it? Saturday, sorry. We traveled on Sunday. On Saturday, and it was 95 degrees and horribly hot and painful. We had 2,500 people there. It was a great turnout. And the New York Times and its now owned newspaper, Boston Globe, didn't even mention it. And I was very pleased to see the ombudsman of the New York Times criticize their own paper for that, because every time they do that, they lose credibility. And that's part of the game. They need to lose credibility, and we need to gain credibility. We need to get people knowing that they can go to Truth Out and Alternet and to Counterpunch and to Global Project Censored. I love Project Censored. They can go to our own websites and get the news from other sources. They don't need to rely on the corporate media. And I think we're in a very important transition. I think it's critical for all of us, when we go back to our communities, to really be very open and urging of an intentional action at the community level and the national level to be the media, to overtake the corporate media, to become the main source of news. You know, the hundreds of people who've been at this conference and watched it on live stream have incredible power now to spread the word about the new economy.
So let's focus on spreading the word.
Sorry.
And the power of the telephone right now. So do you all have that sheet that was passed out? We could use more. Right. If you don't, I'm gonna read off a phone number, and I'm gonna ask you all to write it down. The phone number is 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. This is the phone number of the switchboard at the U.S. Capitol. 202-224-3121. So you can dial this number and they'll answer Capitol, and you can say, I'd like to speak to Representative Pelosi or Senator Feinstein or wherever you're from, pick your representative, and they will connect you. Now, you may get a live person, you may get a recording. Doesn't matter. Either way, the message is the same. You want to say to the person at the other end, hi, I'm your name and where you're from, so they know you're from their district or state. That's really important, because otherwise you don't count. And you say, I'm very worried about this TPP, and this should not have fast-track authority, or as we learned tonight, trade promotional authority. This needs to be aired in front of the full House and full Senate so the American people can see what's in it. Now that will take...
There's a long list.
So call more people if you have time. But we're asking you to dedicate 90 seconds, which is what this will take. So I'd like everybody to turn to the person next to you just for a second and ask each other, when in your day tomorrow can you take 90 seconds to dial 202-224-3121? And let's make a commitment to the person next to you when you're going to do that. When am I going to do it? I am going to do it first thing. All right, I've just heard we're going to make a time tomorrow at the conference when everyone can pull out their cell phone and make the call.
That's a great idea.
Or you can pick a different time. But we want to make, we got 300 some people here tonight. We want to make 300 phone calls.
We'll put them up at citizenstrade.org. And for people who want to be able to share that fact sheet that was distributed, we'll get that up at citizenstrade.org by tomorrow, and you can print out copies or email it to your friends.
All right.
Thank you for preparing it.
So with that, I'd like to please join me in thanking the members of the panel. And please join me in thanking Mark and Ellen and all the staff of the Public Banking Institute for a terrific conference.